Hey, kids, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox, coming at you on January 23rd, 2023. New year, new lunar cycle. We are really kicking it off, actually, with this episode. Really is at the very beginning of the second lunar cycle of the new year. So we will talk all about that when we get into the astrology for the week. But I have a couple of questions. I love you guys asking questions about astrology. So thanks for responding to that request. I'm going to dive right into the first question from Sally, who says, what do the points of fortune, I think she's referring to the part of fortune. What do the part of fortune, as represented by a circle with a cross inside, means also the VX, vertex, on the charts? What she says is, she's noticed these symbolic representations, the circle with a black X in it and the large V, small x. Those are called the part of fortune and the vertex. And she wonders, well, what they are and why she's never heard any readers talk about them.
Those are symbols that shows up when you get your chart created?
Yes, they are. Well, let's just start with the one. Let's just start with the part of fortune because they're very different. So let's treat them separately because they are, in fact, quite separate. The part of fortune is a point that most Western astrological softwares will include when casting a chart. I have a very sophisticated program. I use a program called SolarFire. It's very comprehensive, and I can choose or not choose all sorts of esoteric parts and asteroids and fixed stars. I can have a chart. I can fill up a chart with so many things cool. You can't read the chart. Right?
Yeah.
But part of fortune is something that you find in most Western astrology charts, though it comes from Arabic astrology. It's not even from the sort of Western, lineage of astrology that we know. It comes from a completely different modality in astrology. And so the first thing I want to say is I have no idea why Western astrology grabs the part of fortune from Arabic astrology when there's a list of 20, 30 different what we call parts of in that brand of astrology. There's part of fortune. There's part of day, part of night, part of mothers, part of fathers, part of marriages, part of discord, part of harmony. This is an astrology technology that uses calculations to derive significant points of note. The part of fortune is probably used by Western astrology because it connects directly to what we call the personal triangle, the sun, the moon, and the eastern horizon, or we call that the ascendant. That's the three all you need to have kind of energies. If you have your sun sign, you know what your outsides look like. If you have your moon sign, you can reflect your inner life and your unconscious. And then if you know what time you were born and you have a rising sign, ascendant, you know that point that represents how the world sees you and how you interact with the world and others. Those are the 3 points that make up the personal triangle. I don't know what the calculation is, but the part of fortune takes the placement in a chart of where the sun is, where the moon is, and where the eastern horizon is, and creates through this algorithm this single point that is considered your pot of gold, your most fortunate energy. I sometimes call it the best seat in the house. If you know where your sun was and your moon was and your eastern horizon, and you want to sort of see your humanity at its best.
You mean when you're being your best self, that's how you act? Or?
Well, so first of all, from the language that I just used, the question you just asked is a perfect question. But it's not a relevant question because the part of fortune isn't that. Like, I don't know what the part of fortune is in a real bona fide way. Like, I understand the language
Okay.
of it, but I don't know the value of it in terms of if I'm sitting down with a reading and I tell somebody, like for me, my part of fortune is at 14 degrees of Aquarius. Like, my God, your part of fortune is at 14 of Aquarius, and this means blah, blah, blah. Because there won't be any blah, blah meaning just from knowing the point. It represents an energy or an energetic point that allows for fortunate energy to be activated. So, for example, in my chart, my part of fortune is 14 degrees of Aquarius in the second house, which is the house of values and money and good fortune. My midheaven, my work career point is 1452 Libra. That means there's a trine between my part of fortune and my work consciousness. And it is accurate throughout my whole life. I've been very lucky when it comes to employment or my career. Even if there have been bumps along the way, if I tell you the story of my whole life, even from up till now at 59, the story would be lots of very fortunate experiences that related to how my jobs played out over my life because I've got this part of fortune at 14 degrees. I've seen it play out in synastry where the part of fortune in one chart compared to another chart related so well that the relationship went better than maybe some other aspects of the two charts in comparison might promise. I would say that if you have a slow-moving planet transiting over your part of fortune, one could argue that you will receive that planetary energy in a more fortunate way. So how one uses this in astrology, and I'm an expert in transit astrology. That's like what I do. Now, using part of fortune to understand yourself through the natal chart, the part of fortune and the house that it's in might point to some good luck in that house.
Okay.
How it relates to transit astrology is that I don't think that it does, really, except for maybe when, the moon or a planet is transiting over it or making an aspect to it. It will offset challenging energies that other planetary hits might be making. So I think that one of the reasons why very few people work with it, but she says very few readers have ever mentioned it, is because I don't think it has a tremendous amount of obvious value of how to work with it, certainly not by transit. And then even within the chart itself, you'd have to look at, well, does your part of fortune make aspects to other planets within the chart? And then one could argue that those aspects play out in a fortunate kind of way. So that's what the part of fortune is. And I guess I'm both sort of sharing my limitations in astrology that I don't really work with it that thoroughly. But I don't discount it either. So it's like when it screams at me as being interesting, I'll speak into it. But as a general rule, I'm not looking to see how someone's part of fortune is being aspected in any given calendar year when I'm sitting down and doing a session with them. But that's what it is. That's where it comes from. And hopefully, Sally, if you are listening to this week's episode, you'll take this in and maybe have a clearer view of how to work with how your part of fortune aspects other elements of your chart. So the part of fortune is a kind of esoteric aspect of astrology, which might also be why I don't truck with it all that much, because I am very much about the practicalities of the moving planets creating waves of energy that we ride. So this next question from Brooke is about another abstraction in astrology, only this one's really, really cool and fun, though I don't work with it as much as one might think I would, given the sort of beauty of what I'm about to describe. Brooke asks what I think of the Sabian symbols. Sabian, S-A-B-I-A-N. What do I think of the Sabian symbols? Well, first we have to define them. What are the Sabian symbols? So, have you heard of them?
No, these are great questions because I am getting fully educated right now.
Well, I love that. And I have a buddy, Joe Weston. I don't know if Joe listens to the podcast, but he loves the Sabian symbols. And he will often over the years, when I've written an article about a new moon or a full moon, he'll say, hey, have you seen the Sabian symbol for this full moon or new moon? And it's really cool for this reason or that reason. So without further ado, let me tell you guys what they are. There are 360 degrees in a circle. So there are 360 degrees of the zodiac. Each sign is an equal pie piece of 30 degrees each. 12 times 30, 360. Back in 1925, in the city of San Diego, there was an astrologer, a guy named Mark Edmund Jones, who knew a very gifted clairvoyant, a woman by the name of Elsie Wheeler. And I'm sure you can read about what motivated them to do this, and I certainly don't remember the details of the story well enough to know why they sat down and did this, but one of them had the idea. It had to have been Mark, the astrologer. He's like, let's sit down together, and I will move you through each degree of the zodiac, 1 degree at a time, and we will let your gift produce an image related to the degree point that I present to you. So over a day in 1925, they sat together at Balboa Park, someplace nice and beautiful and pretty, and they went degree by degree by degree for 360 degrees. And with each one, Elsie waited till a symbol appeared and he recorded it. And these became a series of images related to the energy of each subsequent degree. So like he might get to, 16 degrees of Sagittarius and it's like bird flying above the roof. But I'm making that up. There is no symbol. Another one's like melting ice cream cone. Woman at her spinning wheel, right? So she would just dive in through her gift to the energy she was feeling when he posited what degree and what sign that they were at. She was not an astrologer. She was not responding to astrology. She was simply responding to her inner gift. Mark was keeping the astrological structure going during the course of the day. And when they were done, they had these symbols. Now, I cannot tell you why they rose up with so much prominence. It probably had to do with the media in the 20s and radio and psychics and mystics having, airtime, connecting to other people. And somehow these two people in San Diego, California, created something that grabbed the world of astrology. And now they're ubiquitously known and understood. And there are, in fact, other systems of symbols that people have channeled. Like, Joe, if you and I, we could create a Sabian symbol system if we wanted to. We would just get together and do the thing. And, we were done. We'd say, hey, we channeled these symbols, one for each degree of the zodiac.
Yeah.
But somehow when Elsie and Mark did it, it grabbed the psyche of the astrologers of the day. And today it is a well-known system of abstract symbols that are thought to somehow accurately describe the energy of those degree points. Now, I'm a dream interpreter. I'm all about symbolism. When my buddy Joe has sent me like an email saying, hey, this new moon at this moment when the political landscape is blowing up and the Sabian symbol is like, political landscape's blowing up, that's interesting to me. But I don't get grabbed by this aspect of astrology because it's not why I'm in the world of astrology. I'm in the world of astrology to simply navigate energy. Transiting planets create waves of energy that differ day to day. That difference is like weather. I'm the guy who says, get your umbrellas out, kids. It's raining. Watch for the wind today. That's how I use astrology, both personally and publicly. So the fact that a new moon is at a certain degree point and has a symbol associated with it is beautiful and sometimes ironically meaningful. But I don't work with them on a regular basis because it doesn't fit how I use astrology. But if there was anything in astrology that I don't use that I think is gorgeous and beautiful and rich, it's the Sabian symbols.
Wow.
So if you out there, if this is new to you, you want to look it up, just Google Sabian symbols, Sabian, and have at it. So as I hinted at the top of the episode, we're really at the sort of new lunar cycle, even though the new moon was like 2 days ago. We are in the beginning of the first lunar cycle of the year that's not hampered by 2 planets retrograde as we crossed into 2023. We're used to being sort of shot out of the cannon at the top of the year, but with this year, we had 2 personal planets retrograde, which both turned around and went direct. So we enter this week not only with those 2 planets finally moving forward, we also just hit a new moon. And so even though today is the second day of the lunar cycle, it's still moon in Aquarius. We've got something interesting happening with the Aquarius moon that was connected to the new moon, but I'm going to treat as sort of something separate. And that is the conjunction between the moon, Saturn, and Venus that happens today. So the new moon took place at 1 degree of Aquarius, right at the beginning of the mansion. At the end of the Aquarius mansion, at that new moon that we are still in, was Saturn and Venus together by conjunction. When I wrote about this new moon, and I might have even said this in last week's podcast as I talked about the new moon, I referred to the presence of Saturn, the teacher, and Venus, the planet of love, as conjunct during this new moon, as the energy that would keep us sort of right-sized. Aquarius is a rebellious mansion. It's where we are innovative and out of the box. We do things that we normally might not. We risk take. And so there's so much potential for over-the-topness and destabilization in an Aquarius new moon. It was valuable to have this sort of sidebar of not exactly brakes on, but what I was calling keep it right-sized. Think big, think out of the box, but don't overshoot. Not that I'm trying to encourage inhibition. I'm not. I would say don't overshoot and keep things right-sized because Saturn and Venus were together in the new moon, right? I'm not saying that randomly. I'm saying that in this new moon because, yes, we want to honor the Aquarian notion of I can do anything I want and I can try something new, with the added sense of, but also keep the brakes on a little bit for whatever reason. The teacher says so. That's why. So today, as I was preparing for this morning's podcast, and I just sort of glanced at the transits and I looked at the visual of today's astrology and noticed that the new moon today in Aquarius is conjuncting Saturn and Venus. That's kind of like a new moon for our love and relationship consciousness is part of what today's moon wants us to be thinking about. So much of the last year was about healing the heart. So we are available for a greater loving and intimate expression of our relationship consciousness as a result. And just in case anybody checks out when I say relationship because you think I'm talking about your boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives, that's only one aspect of relating. Romantic and sexual relationships are a kind of relationship. And when Venus and Saturn and the new moon get together to set kind of like a new intention sensibility on how you approach relationships, it's all relationships where romance and sexual relationships are a subcategory. One of the things that is true about the Aquarius sign, and of course this mansion that we are in with the sun in Aquarius, is we are thinking about our communities. Aquarius invented the community. And sometimes our relationship consciousness isn't just about who we choose to love or take to bed, but how we love our community, how we participate within our communities as a responsible member of that community, bringing the most love that we can. And so a day where a new moon in Aquarius is also conjuncting Saturn and Venus in Aquarius, we also want to set intentions to think about how what we are intending anew for ourselves during this lunar cycle impacts what is needed for and by the community. Set powerful intentions so that your heart is lit up, Moon conjunct Venus, but make sure that what you're intending for yourself also serves others, Moon conjunct Saturn. Part of the challenge of the first 3 weeks of January was that two personal planets were retrograde at the same time. So Mars moving backwards challenges us with regard to our movement forward, right? If we're trying to move forward, doing our thing, and the planet of movement is moving backwards, that's, a challenge. Nobody needs an explanation of why and how Mercury retrogrades are so challenging. But put them together, a Mars and a Mercury retrograde at the same time, then we are doubly held back. So last week was the week where they both moved forward, but it was also the week they were turning around. And so a personal planet turning around, we might be like, yay, he's moving direct now, thank goodness. But the slow pace of the whole turnaround station is really cranky. So we're also not in last week, so we can kiss that goodbye and understand we are in a new sort of landscape with Mercury and Mars having turned around this week. We're starting to have what we will feel as sort of like movement again, both from our conversations, negotiations, and thinking processes, courtesy of Mercury, but also the ability to move and take action and put goals into initiation that we might have been working on for months and months now and slowed down because of Mars's backward motion. So this is the week where we get to the place where both stationing, retrograding planets are moving forward again. Maybe not quite at the pace that they need to get to, which is very fast compared to where they are right now. But as we start out this week, Mercury has already progressed 1 degree forward than where he turned around last Thursday. And as of today, Monday, the 23rd, Mercury is at 9 degrees of Capricorn, signaling that he's getting back to his usual pace and is no longer in that, what we would call stationary, non-movement challenge. Right? So even when Mercury turns around, for the 3 days after he turns around, he's not moving. So communication is still a little bit challenged. And so as of today, we can sort of say, all right, there's movement in my neck up experiences. We can finally get sort of back to pace, with our thoughts and our interactions with others. Mars is another story because his retrogrades are much longer, much slower is he in his movement during retrograde land. And when he hit 8 degrees of Gemini at the very beginning of January, while he was still backwards, he turned around 3 weeks later at 8 degrees, has not moved, and he's still at 8 degrees. Here we are, a couple of days, 4 days after he's turned around and gone direct. He's still at that, I ain't moving yet. That changes as the week ends. I would say I've sort of been marking the 25th of January as the big huzzah moment because that's when Mars gets to 9 degrees of Gemini. And having been at 8 degrees for almost a solid 3.5, almost 4 weeks, this middle of this week is when we're going to feel the first sort of like inching momentum of the planet of action starting to allow us to act once again. So one could say that with every day that passes this week, we get more and more back to our usual sort of tempo of communication and action and movement, though hopefully we feel very changed about how we move, how we choose, how we behave because of the impact of what we explored while Mars was moving backwards. Notwithstanding that we really have to let Mars play out the entire direct shadow before we'll really understand in our bodies what has shifted. There's something happening this weekend that's important and powerful with regard to changing behaviors and responding to healed energies that we've worked through over the last couple of weeks and months. So if you remember back to last year, 24 days ago. I said that like it's like, oh my God, remember when?
Not too long ago.
Not too long ago. No, I'm asking you to recall that. I spoke a great deal between the end of August and the end of last year that Chiron, the great healer, was pointing towards the south node of the moon in a great eliminator 150-degree quincunx or inconjunct. My favorite angle in astrology. You hear me talk about it all the time because it's the angle that allows small adjustments so that we can move in new directions. And that's how we learn and grow. Like that's how growth occurs. Sometimes in big sweeping moments and paradigm shifts and revolutionary shifts in who we are, that happens. But mostly it's about little by little making new choices. And between the end of August and the end of December, we were doing that in a healing way. Our healing planet was helping us offload karmic baggage of wound little by little by little from the end of the summer through the end of the year. And that angle is loose now. Chiron's at 12 degrees. The south node is still at 8 degrees. Chiron in Aries, south node in Scorpio. So the healing mechanism is in our rearview mirror, but our south node that holds all of that past baggage, well, it's emptied out. That south node has been scraped clean to the best of this moment's ability to do so by 4.5 months of Chiron the healer doing the scraping. And if were listening, you might have heard that I said that the degree point that the south node is at is 8 degrees of Scorpio, where the ding, 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 ding is the 8 degrees, because that's the degree point that Mars has been stopped at for the last month. So what that means is that after all of that deep healing that the last bit of 2022 brought us, as we entered 2023, had the sense of we saw where we wanted to go, but might have felt like we were being energetically held back. That entire first 3 weeks of the year had the planet of Mars not moving, holding the eliminator with the south node. That's like a master class on letting old behaviors go. This has allowed us to move slow enough in our own trajectories where in the past we might have been too impulsive to get the lesson, moving too fast to receive the blessing. We're moving slower and we're being supported in making choices from that clearer south node instead of the one that was baggaged up with all of our crap. So what happens when Mars moves to 9 degrees of Gemini this week? It closes the door of what's been possible of, with the last couple of weeks of Mars still and holding this eliminator angle. So I'm kind of talking about an opportunity that by the time we get through this week is in our rear view mirror. But it's also an opportunity this week where it's at its most effective ability to help us make new choices in our behaviors from healed spaces. because the geometry is still exact. As I am speaking to you today on Monday, January 23rd, the elimination angle is exact until the week ends, which means that as we move through this week, and then Mars completes this exit strategy as we get into like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he will inch towards a sextile with Chiron that I'll talk about a week and a half from now, that deepens and completes a certain level of a personal ability to have taken these two retrogrades, gone through them, and come out the other side ready to make choices from a much more healed place inside of ourselves. And this week, you may not be able to have the full objective sense of what that looks like for yourself. You might have to wait till we get past this week to fully be able to grasp it. Understand that this is a week that you might be given an opportunity to see an old circumstance that maybe used to baffle you and intuitively know how to handle it anew. Have at it.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Our email and dream this week is from Melissa, and she starts off by saying, "Hi, Dr. Lennox. I hope this finds you well. I just want to thank you for all your teachings. They've been instrumental on my path of healing.
Yay.
The new podcast is my favorite. You and Zoe make an incredible team." So I just wanted to say thank you, Melissa. The kind comments are really touching.
Yeah,
you know,
I
they feel great.
never tire of hearing any of these things. So yay.
Yeah. All right, the dream.
The dream.
So she dreamed this one the night she helped assist a medicine ceremony.
Oh, okay.
She's usually sitting in the medicine
yeah.
ceremony, so it was pretty fulfilling to be a assistant in that.
I'll bet.
So she says, "I dreamed I went to a house, not mine or a friend's, to say goodbye to my friend who is moving. There were several buffets for fried foods and meats. I snuck at the fried chicken so no one would see me. While I was gone, my friend left, and her friend stayed, and I was trying to convince him I was cool and a safe person to be around. I looked out the window and saw people in yoga poses in the side of a mountain. They were huddled together for a photo shoot. We went out on the deck to get a closer look, and they disappeared. The deck tipped over as I exclaimed, I knew that would happen before we came out. Once on the ground, I had a bag of trash and was looking for a place to throw it away. I went to the neighbor's garage and tossed it. I saw a large glass-handled wine jug filled with raspberries, some bright and some molded. They had plastic lines running between them, and it seemed to be some type of fermentation system. At that moment, a young, weird witch came in and saw me looking at the jugs. She told me they were her housemates. She was strange and made me quite uncomfortable. She offered me a reading, and I told her to give me her Instagram to reach out later. She had so many she couldn't remember them. She put her hands on the ground and was trying to kick up her legs into a handstand, but couldn't do it. A voice came into my head saying, leave right now. As I walked back to the house with the deck, I saw a red truck that said deck removal. I looked over to the other neighbor's house, and it's the Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz. She's friendly now. She gives me a smile and a wave. Just then, the wind blows so strong, I grab onto the grass to keep from blowing away. I'm in that handstand position. I look over to where the deck was and see my mom standing there looking at me. I think, oh good, she sees me and can save me. Then a large turtle crawls right next to me, and I'm surprised and excited. At this point, I awaken.
Oh, well, thank God.
Yeah, so it's kind of...
Well, it's long.
Are you okay with this dream?
I love the dream. I'm going to try to work with it. And for those of you who are listening, I type notes so that I can take it in and have reference point. And this is one of those dreams where if it was a dream circle and you were looking at me, I'd be glazing over in my eyes, trying to sort of hide my overwhelm at how long the dream is. But we're going to work with it. Because you know why I want to work with this dream? Because this dream to me is about sort of authenticity on the one hand and whatever is the struggle before authenticity, you know, like the witch that's not the good witch in the dream, the one that freaks her out, and the handstand, the woman who can, and then she does it at the end. So let's see if we can't go back to the top of the dream and move through it sort of like image by image and sort of make some sense about what landed for me when I listened to it.
Let's do it. She adds 2 details about her life that I'm just going to throw
good.
in
Let's
there.
Hear them. Yeah, no, do.
That being, she's actually a vegan that rarely eats fried food. So
I knew
the meats and fried food.
No, I didn't know that she was
You
a vegan.
did, huh?
But I am gonna say so much about the food choices in a minute. So it's hysterical that you're now telling me that in life she's a vegan because, again, authenticity versus like who is she gonna be, right? Is she gonna be the smart eating vegan or is she gonna be in some shadow of I'm sneaking the fried chicken? Anyway, okay, so she's a vegan. What else?
She's also early in her career as a healer. She's a 4-year removed alcoholic, and her mother is probably the last person she'd call to save herself.
Oh my goodness.
A lot of oppositions here then, I guess.
Yes, a lot of oppositions, a lot of shadow, and a lot of like, I love hearing, Melissa, that you're early in this career. Because I think, and you are, it sounded like what you said, Zoe, is that this facilitation, right? You did say that Melissa sitting as a space holder in this medicine ceremony was the first time she did that.
So I don't know if this is the very first time, but she is usually in it rather than
right. Okay, so she certainly says this, right? She tells us that she's usually in it, but she's more like the career she's developing than the practitioner she might be helping.
Yes.
By the in real life experience of when this dream came up, she was sitting in the big chair, not the little chair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she's in a house that's not hers or her friends, which means she's in consideration of who she's becoming as a healing presence. And it ain't quite yet who she is, right? Because the house in the dream is not hers, it's not her friends, which means it's got to be the sense of self, because we know that homes and houses and dreams are aspects of self. And if the first line of the dream is, I was in a house, then we know it's a dream about Melissa's sense of self, but it's got to be some brand new sense of self because there's no association with it. It ain't hers, it's not a friend, she doesn't recognize it, and she's saying goodbye to a friend who is moving. That means that some aspect of self is no longer accurate, real, authentic. That part of her has to move away. She's saying goodbye. But we know a lot about what she's saying goodbye to, you know, drinking, bad eating, mother relationships that are challenging, and whatever led her to get on the spiritual path that also helped her carve out a career path that would align her spiritual journey with what she could do to serve others. Great, yay. The friend who's moving might be reflecting the old self that has to go. So how is she going to sustain and nurture herself in this new life? Well, we have images to show that. There are buffets. So buffets, food, the availability of food and nurturance says, okay, now the dream is considering how we're going to sustain and nurture. So I love that the dream lets Melissa go into the shadow of sustenance and nurturance, sneaking some fried chicken, meats and food that are antithetical to her vegan waking life sensibility shows up in the dream. And for me, this is a beautiful shadow exploration, not even exploration. The shadow needs to have some breath. It needs to be acknowledged. And her eating the meat, sneaking it so no one would see, is like allowing the shadow in Melissa of I am not that to have a little breathing life in her dream state. This is valuable. It's one of the ways that dreams compensate for our unconscious fears and anxieties by giving them an opportunity to have some life so that we can wake up the next day and stay vegan. So I'm going to jump to the end of the dream for a second, just to complete the theme of how I feel like the dream begins and the dream ends with a very clear theme. We've already described the opening sensibility that Melissa is contemplating the self she's creating. So that when she comes into sort of connection in the dream with this young, weird witch, this, to me, because of what shows up with the witch, the witch comes when Melissa is handling fermented beverage, alcohol in process. And we now know, we didn't know this when I heard the dream, but you said, now know she's in an alcohol-free lifestyle. So there has to be something about this witch that comes that she's uncomfortable with, has to represent an aspect of Melissa's healing presence, her inner witch, her inner shaman. I think this is an old version of that. Partly because when she's hanging out with this jug of alcohol, that's when the witch comes, and I just think there's a connection now that I know that alcohol is specifically something that Melissa has moved away from. When she comes near the alcohol in the dream, in comes this aspect of self. This young, weird witch is a part of Melissa because it's Melissa's dream. She sees her with the jugs, right? And then she said she was strange and maybe uncomfortable, right? So there's got to be some connection of an inner perspective of what it is to be on that sort of shamanistic path. And this aspect of self is like ready to say, I will offer you a reading. And she mentions social media, which is another way that modern mystics have to sort of understand, well, who am I? Am I teaching and being of service, or am I going for the social media clicks? You know, think about this in my own life. If I talked about world events and astrological connections, like if I were reading Harry and Meghan's chart these days, I'd be famous. And I get asked to. People are like, what do you think about Meghan's, Harry and their charts? Like, I'm not looking at that. That's the shittiest use of astrology I've ever heard. At any rate, I think I may be projecting about this image in the dream, but even that was like, she has so many Instagrams, she's offering a reading. There's something about the social media moment in that conversation that's, well, not that version not that version of putting myself out there. And in that moment, she tried to do a handstand and couldn't. This is what's really important. The handstand is sort of a powerful marker of, are you strong and powerful within your yoga practice? And so in this moment, when she's in this, I think, false old self of what a mystic looks like, she can't even do the handstand. So she has to leave right now. I love that. That's like, if I go towards old ideas of what it is to be a healing presence, I'm ineffective. That's not where I want to be. I need to go. Now then, we're in this weird, interesting place where the deck removal is happening. So if we go back to the middle part of the dream where she's in the back, she's on that deck, neighbor's yard, there's all this trash associated with that deck. The deck being removed is about the change and transformation, the change in structure that is taking place that this dream is sort of presenting us with. And the fact that her mom is on the deck might have something to do with the qualities or the themes or the patterns that are being, reworked, have perhaps to do with the mom relationship. But the thing that I love the best is that instead of this witch that's young that makes her uncomfortable, that I think is a reflection of her old ideas of what it is to be kind of witchy in the world, she goes back to something more pure, more simple, the Wicked Witch of the West, which is a child's idea of what a witch is, right? So from a children's movie in a way. And this image of a witch that might be the first, I'm dating myself. I don't know how Melissa is. For me, The Wizard of Oz was huge in my childhood, but like anybody under 40, it's like, what? Depending on Melissa's age, the Wicked Witch of the West may have a more powerful or less powerful image. But we're going to assume that because it's in her dream that she saw The Wizard of Oz as a child, and then somehow this witch is an image that is in there about this is what a witch looks like, but in the dream, she's friendly. And that to me says, okay, this is a more organic witch image than that weird one you had to get away from, Melissa. And then it's when we connect to the Wicked Witch of the West that the wind blows, which is like the winds of God, if you will. The winds blow and she's in a handstand. And that's when she can look at the deck with her mom on it. And I'm guessing that when she's in this, I'm a witch, I can do a handstand, I can also handle my mother.
I love that.
I may have left out a couple of things in the second part of the dream, but I couldn't keep track of every little tiny thing. So thank you, Melissa, for the dream. Thank you, of course, for the very kind words, and have at it.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.